We've been trapped in this forest for exactly 16 days. Ever since our friend died, it feels like his restless spirit has been haunting us. Our electronics died a long time ago. Compasses are useless here. The forest is suffocated by a perpetual, sunless fog, and no matter how far we walk, there's no sign of a way out. It all started with a college club trip I put together. Not long ago, a satellite crashed deep within this primeval forest. Because of the treacherous terrain and absolute remoteness, the space agency abandoned the recovery. My friends and I thought it would be an epic adventure to find it. There were 4 of us: Lin, Specs, Chien, and me. But shortly after we entered the dense woods, disaster struck. Lin accidentally slipped and plummeted off a sheer cliff. Guilt eats at me constantly. If I hadn't insisted on taking a shortcut, Lin wouldn't have died. But right now, mourning isn't an option. Surviving is. And so, the 3 of us kept walking in circles in this ancient woodland. Every night, I dream of Lin's mangled body, blaming me for the shortcut and getting our car stolen. I'm starting to lose my grip on reality. The faces of my 2 remaining friends are etched with nothing but hollow despair. A few days later, we stumbled upon a burnt-out campfire. Our campfire from days ago. We had just walked in another massive circle. Exhausted, we collapsed into the dirt and made a desperate decision. We were going to eat the mushrooms. They were the only seemingly edible things we'd found in this forest. We had avoided them out of fear they were toxic, but now it was either eat them or starve. Hidden in the lining of my backpack was a single piece of bread, our last beacon of hope. We swore we wouldn't touch it until the day we finally made it out. We lit a fire and boiled the chopped mushrooms. The taste was vile, but it filled our empty stomachs, and at that point, nothing else mattered. But shortly after eating, a violent wave of dizziness hit me. I staggered, trying to stand, but my body refused to obey. A few feet away, Specs and Chien were already face down in the dirt, completely motionless. The mushrooms were toxic. I realized right then we were destined to die in this forest. But just as my vision faded, I heard voices coming from the tree line. Using the very last ounce of my strength, I dragged myself toward the sound. It was Lin, our dead friend. Beside him stood a blurry, dark silhouette with its arm draped casually over his shoulder. I wanted to rush over to him, but the dark figure waved its hand, summoning a violent gust of wind that barreled straight toward me. The wind and debris lifted me into the air, forcing my eyes shut. Amidst the chaos, Lin reached his hand out to me. His voice cut through the wind, firm and resolute, telling me to trust him. I snapped my eyes open. I was alive. My friends were right beside me, and so was Lin. He told us he hadn't died after all. There happened to be a river at the bottom of the cliff. He was swept out of the forest by the current and had trekked all the way back in from the outside world just to find us. He said he left markers along the way. All we had to do was follow him, and we'd finally go home. This news instantly reignited our hope. We followed Lin through the dense forest for 5 hours until we hit a massive cliff face. Lin confidently pointed and said the exit was right here. We had passed this spot a dozen times. It was a dead end. But then Lin led us around a massive boulder, revealing a hidden, narrow gorge tucked perfectly out of sight. No wonder we couldn't find it. Emerging from the dark gorge, we faced a fork in the road. One path was lush and vibrant, the other was dead and rotting. As we hesitated, Lin's face grew grim. He pointed to the dead path on the left and told us it was the only way out. His eyes were ice cold, completely shutting down any argument. I chose to trust him, but a strange feeling gnawed at my gut. He seemed like a completely different person, constantly frowning, barely speaking. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just trauma. That night, we built a fire and decided to eat our last piece of bread to celebrate. But when I unzipped the hidden compartment, it was gone. We figured a wild animal must have stolen it. We were only 2 days away from freedom anyway, so we let it go. The next day, the fog grew so thick we could barely see our own hands. The silhouettes of the trees blurred, replaced by what looked like shadowy human figures standing in the mist. Thinking we had finally reached civilization, I instinctively reached out to touch one of them. My foot slipped. I nearly plummeted off a sheer drop before Specs grabbed me by the collar. That's when I realized we were standing at the edge of a massive, pitch-black chasm. Lynn explained the figures were just dense miasma in the valley toxic gas that took human shapes when concentrated. He told us he had already built a wooden log bridge over the chasm. Lynn weighed about 185 pounds, Specs was 175, I was 130, and Qian was 110. Logic dictated that if the bridge could hold Lynn, the rest of us were perfectly safe. Lynn crawled across the bridge first. I went second. Qian went third. We all made it. But just as Specs climbed onto the bridge, the rotting wood snapped. Before he could even scream, Specs plummeted into the pitch-black abyss. He was gone. But we had no time to mourn. Lynn pushed us to keep moving. Soon after, we actually found it, the crashed satellite, the whole reason we came here. But something was horribly wrong. It had only been half a month, yet the massive metal structure was completely decayed. When I lightly brushed it with my hand, the metal crumbled into a pile of ash. Before I could process how impossible that was, a chilling howl echoed from the trees behind us. Wolves. Lynn led us on a frantic sprint until we hit another cliff. He had a rope pre-rigged here. We just had to climb up to escape. Lynn scrambled up first. Qian didn't know how to rock climb, so I had to carry her on my back. The combined weight was agonizing, but I gritted my teeth and barely dragged us to the top. Lynn reached his arm down to pull Qian up the rest of the way, but as their hands met, he missed her grip. Qian plummeted into the valley below, right into the waiting jaws of the pack. Watching my friends die, one after another, pushed me to the absolute brink. Lynn softly comforted me, saying we had to keep going. He reached out his hand to pull me up, and that's when my blood ran cold. Lynn was strictly left-handed. Why was he reaching out with his right? I started replaying every single moment since his return. Paranoia crept in like poison. Was this really Lynn? And if not, what did he want with me? We finally arrived at the last crossroad. Lynn excitedly pointed to the left path, declaring it was the exit. But my body started trembling uncontrollably. The path on the left was clearly a swamp. Its flat surface reeked of rot and death, and I could faintly see the rotting hooves of an animal trapped beneath the muck. Lynn flashed a sly, desperate look, urging me to hurry. "That's a swamp!" I screamed at him. "You're not Lynn!" Hearing this, Lynn lowered his head in sorrow. He begged me to trust him, saying there were things he simply wasn't allowed to tell me. A horrifying thought clicked in my brain. Were Specs and Qian's deaths really accidents, or did he orchestrate them? Terrified, I turned and bolted down the right path. Lynn chased after me and tackled me to the dirt. In the ensuing struggle, I kicked him hard in the chest, sending him stumbling backward into the swamp. Slowly, he stood up from the muck. Under the harsh beam of my flashlight, his shadow revealed his true form. It was a mangled, broken corpse. He was missing an arm, a leg, and a massive chunk of his skull. It was exactly how he would have looked after falling off that cliff. Crying, Lynn finally confessed the truth. He had made a pact with death itself. He wasn't allowed to tell us the truth directly, or else he'd be trapped forever in this forest, just like us. "We're all dead," he sobbed. On the 15th day of getting lost, right after Lynn's fatal fall, the rest of us ate those toxic mushrooms and died. But they weren't normal mushrooms. They were hallucinogenic fungi from hell that clouded the souls of the dead, making us forget we had perished. The three of us had been wandering in circles in this forest for 50 years. The mushrooms wiped our memories, leaving us with only the recollection of our last 15 days alive. Every 15 days, we would eat the mushrooms, die, wake up, and repeat the loop. Lynn was supposed to cross over, but seeing us trapped in this agonizing purgatory, he struck a deal with the Grim Reaper. He couldn't tell us the truth, and he couldn't kill us himself, or we'd turn into restless, vengeful spirits. His only option was to guide us to accidental deaths to free our souls. Because his spirit body was missing limbs, he weighed practically nothing, which is why he safely crossed the bridge that broke under Specs's weight. And because he didn't have a left arm anymore, he couldn't catch Qian when she fell. Only through a true death could our loop be broken. But could I believe him now? The swamp was already swallowing Lin up to his chest. I pointed at the path on the right. If I go out that way, that's the real world, right? Without waiting for an answer, I sprinted toward the light without looking back. Lin's final, desperate screams echoed behind me. Don't go. We don't belong there anymore. If you go back, something worse than being lost will happen. I burst through the tree line. The concrete of the city was right in front of me. I was finally back. I threw my head back and screamed in triumph. At that exact moment, the morning sun crested the horizon. But as the first rays of sunlight touched my skin, I didn't feel warmth. I felt a hellish, agonizing burn. Embracing the light I had fought so hard to reach, my body instantly turned to ash.